Lauren and Michael Carter seemed like the picture of newlywed bliss, but behind the smiles and the Caribbean sunsets, their honeymoon would end not with love, it would end with Lauren's lifeless body in a bathtub and Michael at the center of a chilling investigation that revealed secrets no one expected. Lauren and Michael Carter arrived at the Caribbean resort with the kind of excitement that made them stand out among the other newlyweds. They were young, glowing with the fresh energy of marriage, and ready to enjoy a week that was supposed to mark the start of their life together. The resort was a dreamlike setting. White sand beaches stretched endlessly, palm trees swayed in the salty breeze, and the crystal-clear ocean shimmered like glass under the afternoon sun. For the staff, they were just another couple among many, smiling and polite, carrying the quiet hope that this would be the trip they remembered for the rest of their lives. At first, everything seemed perfect. The couple lounged by the pool, laughed over cocktails, and posed for photographs that looked like advertisements for romance itself. But beneath the surface, small details began to stand out to the keen observer. Lauren appeared distracted at times, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. She was polite, even affectionate with Michael, but occasionally a flicker of unease crossed her face. Guests who noticed assumed it was simple nerves or travel fatigue. After all, weddings were stressful, and honeymoons were often the time when exhaustion hit hardest. The third evening of their stay took a different turn. Staff recalled Michael drinking heavily at the poolside bar. He ordered round after round, laughing too loudly at jokes no one else seemed to hear. Lauren, however, was nowhere to be seen. Several guests remembered watching him glancing toward the elevators, restless and irritated, before returning to his drink. Hours passed, and the once charming husband became a fixture at the bar, his face flushed and his behavior increasingly erratic. The following morning shattered the illusion of paradise. When housekeeping entered the Carters' suite, they expected to tidy up another room left in a haze of sunscreen and empty glasses. Instead, they stumbled upon a chilling sight. Lauren was lying face down in the bathtub, fully dressed in a slip she had worn to bed, surrounded by shards of broken glass from a fallen wine bottle. The water was still running, filling the room with a low hum that mixed with the scent of alcohol. A pool of spilled red wine stained the bathroom tiles, spreading outward like a dark halo. Panic followed swiftly. Staff called security, who quickly shut down the floor and alerted local authorities. The scene was confusing, almost staged in its chaos. Some believed it was an accident, the result of too much wine in a slippery tub. Others whispered of something darker, pointing to the bruises faintly visible on Lauren's arms. The image of a happy couple basking in marital bliss crumbled in an instant, replaced by the grim reality of tragedy. Guests at the resort would later recall how quickly paradise turned to dread. The police tape, the flashing lights, and the hushed voices of investigators all seemed out of place against the backdrop of turquoise seas and bright skies. What should have been a honeymoon filled with joy had become the opening chapter of a story no one could have imagined, a story that would unravel secrets, expose hidden motives, and leave everyone wondering how love could turn so fatally wrong. Authorities arrived at the resort with a sense of urgency, moving quickly to secure the Carters' suite. The vibrant energy of the Caribbean seemed to fade as investigators combed through the room, their gloved hands carefully collecting every piece of evidence. At first glance, the scene looked like a tragic accident. The shattered wine bottle, the running water, and Lauren's lifeless body suggested a slip brought on by alcohol. It was a neat explanation, one that fit the chaos of the bathroom. Yet the longer they looked, the more details began to stand out, details that resisted easy answers. The bruising on Lauren's wrists drew immediate attention. It wasn't the kind of injury one would expect from falling into a bathtub. Her fingernails showed faint signs of scraping, as if she had struggled. The glass fragments scattered around the room seemed oddly placed, as though they had been arranged rather than left to chance. Even the water level in the tub raised questions. It was only halfway filled, suggesting she had been placed there rather than slipping while bathing. Meanwhile, Michael's behavior came under scrutiny. He appeared devastated when officials informed him of his wife's death, but his story quickly raised red flags. He told investigators that he had spent the night drinking at the resort bar, overwhelmed by the heat and exhaustion from the previous days. He claimed he returned to the room late, passed out on the couch, and had no idea what had happened until he was woken by police. His grief looked real to some, but others found it too carefully performed, his tears quick to appear, yet strangely shallow. Security footage soon complicated his account. Cameras in the hallway showed Michael leaving the bar earlier than he admitted, pacing outside the room for long stretches before finally entering. Hours later, he was seen exiting the suite and returning again, each time looking increasingly unsettled. The final footage placed him back inside just hours before Lauren's body was discovered. These movements clashed with his claim that he had been asleep the whole time. Back home, friends and family were questioned to piece together a clearer picture of the marriage. The portrait that emerged was troubling. While many described Lauren as optimistic and kind, they also remembered how she had confided doubts about her future with Michael. She had voiced concerns about his temper, speaking cautiously about arguments that left her shaken. One close friend even recalled Lauren admitting that she felt trapped, but she insisted she was determined to make the marriage work. Investigators began to see a possible motive hiding beneath the surface of Paradise. What seemed like an accident now looked like a calculated event disguised as tragedy. Yet, at this stage, there was no conclusive evidence linking Michael to his wife's death. Theories formed, but they were only that, unproven suspicions in a case that was rapidly becoming more complex. The picture of a loving honeymoon was cracking, revealing something much darker beneath. Every new detail pulled investigators further from the idea of accident and closer to the possibility of murder. The autopsy results transformed the investigation from speculation into suspicion. Toxicology reports showed that Lauren had high levels of alcohol in her system, but the pattern was inconsistent with voluntary drinking. Alongside the alcohol, traces of a sedative were discovered, a drug not prescribed to her and uncommon for recreational use. The mixture suggested she had been incapacitated before her death. Forensic experts confirmed that the bruises on her wrists were consistent with restraint, not with a simple fall. The once convincing image of an accidental drowning now looked increasingly like a staged crime scene. Detectives dug deeper into Michael's history, determined to understand the man who now stood at the center of the storm. A former girlfriend came forward with troubling allegations. She described a man who was charming at first, but soon revealed a darker side: controlling behavior, manipulation, and sudden bursts of anger that left her fearful for her safety. She admitted that she had ended the relationship abruptly, unable to tolerate his unpredictable nature. Investigators saw these accounts as more than coincidence. They suggested a pattern of behavior that aligned disturbingly with the circumstances of Lauren's death. The resort became a hive of whispers as news of the case spread among guests and staff. Tourists, once carefree and sunburnt, now gathered in quiet corners, speculating about what had really happened in the Carter suite. Some remembered seeing Michael and Lauren arguing softly during dinner, their smiles masking tension that only surfaced when they thought no one was looking. Others recalled Michael's drinking habits, his tendency to grow restless and moody as the night wore on. Each memory added weight to the growing suspicion that the tragedy was far from accidental. While Michael continued to deny involvement, investigators uncovered a crucial piece of evidence among his belongings. Folded neatly inside his travel documents was a newly signed life insurance policy, naming him as the sole beneficiary of Lauren's estate. The policy, taken out only weeks before the wedding, amounted to $500,000. The timing was damning. What had appeared to be a romantic gesture of security now looked like a chilling motive. Prosecutors would later argue that Lauren's death was not only premeditated, but financially motivated. Michael's defense maintained that the evidence was circumstantial, pointing to the absence of a direct link tying him to the sedatives or the exact moment of Lauren's death. Yet the accumulation of facts painted an increasingly grim picture. A wife expressing fear of her husband, a history of control and aggression, unexplained substances in her system, and an insurance policy that promised fortune. All of it wove together into a narrative that was impossible to ignore. For Lauren's family, the findings confirmed their deepest fears. They had watched her walk down the aisle only weeks earlier, full of hope for the future, unaware that the man waiting for her might also be the man plotting her end. The investigation was no longer about an accident in paradise. It was about unraveling a calculated plan carried out in the shadows of a honeymoon meant to celebrate love. The investigation pushed forward with new determination as detectives traced the source of the sedatives found in Lauren's body. Pharmacy records back in Michael's hometown revealed that the drugs had been purchased under his name only days before the honeymoon. This discovery was crucial, tying him directly to the substance that likely rendered his wife incapable of defending herself. The purchase stripped away another layer of his carefully constructed story, suggesting premeditation rather than chance. Witnesses at the resort began to recall details that seemed insignificant at first, but grew darker in hindsight. Guests staying in nearby rooms mentioned hearing muffled arguments coming from the Carters' suite late at night. One couple even remembered a sudden crash, as though something heavy had fallen, followed by silence. These recollections added weight to the theory that violence had erupted behind the closed door long before Lauren's body was discovered. What had been dismissed as ordinary honeymoon quarrels now seemed to point towards something sinister. Investigators also studied Michael's movements in the hours leading up to the discovery. The resort's surveillance system, extensive though not flawless, offered a clearer timeline. Michael was seen leaving the bar earlier than he claimed, returning to the suite with an expression of agitation. Later, footage captured him carrying multiple ice buckets up to the room, far more than any guest would reasonably need. Experts suggested that the excessive ice may have been used to cool the bathtub water, deliberately altering the temperature in order to confuse the medical examiners about Lauren's exact time of death. It was a calculated step that revealed a disturbing awareness of forensic procedures. Every piece of evidence stacked higher against him. The insurance policy, the pharmacy purchase, the conflicting timeline, and now the manipulative attempt to tamper with the crime scene, all combined to create a chilling portrait of intent. Michael's outward appearance of grief, which had once gained him sympathy, now looked like an act. His public breakdowns and carefully chosen words were interpreted as strategies to protect himself rather than genuine sorrow for his wife's passing. Prosecutors grew increasingly confident, but they knew the case still carried risks. Defense attorneys argued that circumstantial evidence, no matter how overwhelming, did not prove beyond doubt that Michael had killed Lauren. They painted him as a man trapped by coincidence, misunderstood actions, and tragic timing. They leaned on the lack of direct evidence. No witness had seen the moment Lauren died. No recording captured the act, and no weapon existed beyond the sedatives that could also be explained as self-administered. Still, the hidden footage and the meticulous planning spoke louder than excuses. To investigators, this was not a spontaneous crime of passion, but a prearranged plan. Michael had entered his marriage not with love, but with motive. The honeymoon had not been about celebration, but about opportunity. As the evidence mounted, the story of Lauren's final days became clearer. She had walked into a marriage believing in a future, unaware that her husband saw her only as a means to profit. The paradise setting had been nothing more than the backdrop to her carefully engineered death. The trial of Michael Carter became a national obsession, transforming a private tragedy into a spectacle that filled newspaper headlines and dominated nightly news segments. Courtrooms overflowed with journalists, true crime enthusiasts, and members of the public, eager to witness the unraveling of a story that seemed too cruel to believe. The image of a grieving husband, once sympathetic, was steadily replaced by the portrayal of a calculating manipulator who had used marriage as a weapon. Every detail of the honeymoon was examined, dissected, and reassembled into a narrative of betrayal and greed. Prosecutors opened their case by laying out the chain of evidence with painstaking clarity. They presented the toxicology report showing the sedatives in Lauren's system, the pharmacy records tying the purchase to Michael, and the insurance policy signed only weeks before the wedding. The resort's surveillance footage was shown frame by frame, capturing Michael's restless pacing, his unexplained trips with buckets of ice, and his repeated entries and exits from the suite. Each element added weight to the theory that Lauren's death had been carefully orchestrated rather than accidental. Witnesses added further depth to the story. Friends of Lauren described her growing unease before the wedding, her confessions about Michael's temper, and her quiet doubts about whether she had made a mistake. Former partners of Michael testified about his history of controlling behavior, painting a portrait of a man whose charm concealed something far darker. Even staff at the resort spoke of his strange demeanor the night of Lauren's death, recalling his agitation and his insistence on staying at the bar, despite appearing deeply unsettled. The defense countered by attacking the credibility of the evidence. They argued that the sedatives could have been taken voluntarily, that the insurance policy was a common precaution for newlyweds, and that the ice buckets could be explained as nothing more than a desire to keep drinks cold. They emphasized the absence of a direct witness to the crime, reminding the jury that suspicion, no matter how strong, did not equal proof. Michael himself maintained his innocence, portraying himself as a broken man, accused unjustly while grieving his wife. The jury deliberated for days, weighing the mountain of circumstantial evidence against the possibility of an accident. The decision was not easy, but in the end, the accumulation of facts was too overwhelming to ignore. Michael Carter was found guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict brought gasps of relief in the courtroom, followed by tears from Lauren's family, who had endured months of agony waiting for justice. For the public, the case became a chilling reminder of how quickly love could transform into something deadly. The Caribbean honeymoon, once imagined as a paradise of beginnings, had instead become the stage for a meticulously planned killing. Lauren's story ended far from the life she dreamed of, but her death ensured that the man responsible would never profit from it. The trial closed with the haunting truth that behind the smiles of wedding photos and the glow of tropical sunsets, darkness had been hiding all along.